welcome to this conversation, Art. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. Tell me where this is. Tell me where this is finding you, and where's Corona found you, physically, geographically, and,
Corona has found me in
spiritually.
Corona has found me in Jerusalem. I came here for the winter, for the second winter in a row. I was thinking to come for 3 months. I came in December. And as Corona broke out, my flight was canceled by El Al. The direct Boston, Tel Aviv-Boston flight was canceled. And after much consultation with my daughter in Boston, she works in public health, so she has ideas about these things. We both decided it was safer to stay here, that Israel seems to be handling this event a little better than the United States is. And a double flight would be a danger in itself, so I decided to stay. It's been a wonderful decision. I'm very happy to be here. I have a very good network of dear friends here and a support network. The nephew of a friend is doing my shopping for me. He came by today with a kilo of ground carp so I can make gefilte fish. So the world is all right after all, and there will be a Pesach. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm here in Jerusalem. The question is how long I'll be here. I don't have a ticket back. I think I'll get one for June or July, but who knows? People are saying 3 months, some people are saying 6 months, some people are saying 18 months until, in Hebrew we say, Ad Ya'avor Za'am, until this fierce plague passes us. It's hard to know.
Is this creating anxiety in you?
A little bit, not too much. As I say, my support network here has been very good. Handling this isolation, living alone, I'm a widower. And I live alone, and handling it alone has got its own problems. I haven't been out of the house for the past couple of days at all. Usually I go out for walks once or twice during the day, but it's just happened that yesterday the weather wasn't good, and today I was busy cleaning my kitchen and teaching three different sessions, so I just didn't get out at all. So I feel that, and I have to do this in a way that it is possible to do it over the long run. I could handle a week in the house completely cooped up, but without seeing anybody, I won't be able to go for 2 months. So on Shabbat, some dear friends and I met outdoors and had a conversation from 6 feet apart, and that was fine. And I need to do things like that.
What about your role as a religious leader? I didn't really get a chance to introduce you. I should introduce you. I apologize for that. So I know that you are a dean of a post-denominational rabbinical school, professor of Jewish studies, an important theologian, scholar of Kabbalah. Your art dealer history we'll put to the side for now. Is there anything important that I've forgotten about the many facets of Art Green?
That's all right. You can leave that aside. I'm the rector of the rabbinical school that I founded 18 years ago, and that's in Boston. But here I do lots of teaching to all kinds of very interesting people. Jerusalem is there's such a rich Jewish and spiritual life here. There are so many seekers in this place now. This really feels like a major breakthrough in Israeli life, and there are all kinds of people coming to talk to me and wanting to learn from me. And that's been a really important part of what I do. So I'm teaching 2 or 3 different groups and reading Hasidic sources, and I've been writing a commentary on the Jewish prayer book for many years. I have a group of people studying that with me. And so it's been a sort of spiritually very rich time for me, even though it's obviously a very difficult time for me and the world and all of us in between.
So has that difficulty filtered into your teaching vocation? Has it placed specific challenges before you?
Well, there's the challenge you just experienced, which is the technology challenge. We have to talk about that. I know how to invite one person onto a Zoom conversation very well, but creating groups. Our faculty back in Boston, I get all their emails, so I'm watching them, learning how to manage chat rooms and chavruta groups and study sessions and split screens and whiteboards and everything else on Zoom, and I'm a little bit jealous that they've developed all that talent with it, and I just do it basically the old-fashioned way, which is to say I lecture and then I look to see who's raising a hand or waving a hand around to have a conversation. But it can be done much better than that. So that's one level of challenge. But I feel I ought to have something to say about what's going on in our lives. We are passing through the valley of the shadow of death. We're passing through something that feels like the first Passover in Egypt, with may no person go out of your house, and may the destructive spirit not come into your homes. Those verses echo so loudly, it's hard not to feel that we are reliving it in some way. So I feel I have to have something to say that makes some sense in this age, and that's not easy to find.
So what are you saying?
What am I saying? With a group sponsored by our dear friend Chaviva Pedaya at Ben Gurion University earlier today, I was talking about a passage in the Haggada. There's a passage in the Haggada that we'll read in 2 nights on Passover that begins, V'hisha amda, is that which stood up for our ancestors in every generation. But that which is written in the feminine, he V'hisha amda, doesn't say who, it says he. It used the feminine pronoun for some unexplainable reason. And that gives the Kabbalists a chance to say that this is God as great mother. This is binah, who has redeemed her children from Egypt. So I talk about binah internally, binah meaning a kind of deep inner place within us that we don't really understand, but that we know remains a source of unbroken strength. The Kabbalists say that the breakage, the damage, the alienation that makes us alone in the world and feeling separate has only taken place up to a certain point in the inner world. But there is beyond that a sort of whole place. It's the womb out of which you were born. It's the womb out of which all our ideas and thoughts and language are also born. And we have a chance to go back to that place, and that God as she is a redeeming force in our lives. So I've been talking about that, talking about turning inward. That binah and hitbonenut are the same word in Hebrew, meditation, and that inner place of understanding are the same root, the same word. So I've been talking about that turn inward to the deepest of places where we can feel a wholeness that's beyond all the breakage that's so deep in our lives right now, and trying to find our way back to it.
Okay, I think this is going to spell out the agenda for the next 20 minutes or so. So why don't we look at this notion of the Great Mother, binah, understanding, heart. Maybe you want to add repentance into it, because someone once told me that was part of that cluster of associations.
It is the cluster. I would call it the return, the great return, rather than repentance. Repentance sounds like it's about sin, and this notion is really sort of turning inward, the great return. Let's call it.
So here's what I propose as a program now. Why don't we take this key insight and visit some particular challenges that we face during the Corona times and that come up in people's lives, and see how this insight is helpful. And alternatively, if other insights come up, we can look at those as well. So you had said a moment ago, separation. So let's begin with that particular point, because you'd mentioned there was separation, and then returning to the Great Mother is what brings us back together. Corona seems to play out a very interesting tension between being separated and being integrated. On the one hand, everyone is forced into their own space. On the other hand, Corona couldn't happen without a very fundamental interdependency of all aspects of life. What starts in China coming here, animal coming into human, global systems interlocking and collapsing. So there's an interesting play there. How would this notion of binah, repentance, understanding, how does that equip us with a language and with tools with which we can address the present moment?
I would begin with the deep universalism of it. Everything that is in the world is born out of that place of the cosmic womb. This Corona is is something that has to show us the foolishness of all the petty things that divide us. Here in Israel, we see it happening on the Israeli side and in Gaza and across the border in Jordan, and it doesn't differentiate. It doesn't know what tribe you belong to and what flag you're waving, and that we are sitting in front of the news. I've become a bit of a CNN addict again, of course. And so you watch what's happening in China and what's happening in Italy, and see these long lists of countries and how many dead in each country, and you really feel a sort of universal brotherhood. And I think that sense of we are all born out of the same place. Know where you come from and where you're going. We're all sort of born out of that same universal place. And we have the same great divine parents out of which we are born. I think that's the first thing that takes me to.
you're saying that binah has this universal significance. Everything was born and everyone was born from that mother, and returning to that mother allows us to go past all differentiation. And the point that you're making is this differentiation, a point that the Kabbalists, well, did they or did not they make that? I'm curious to hear. But your emphasis is on the human universal potential that arises from this fundamental spiritual insight.
That's where my emphasis is, and I think you can see it in the Kabbalists too. Remember that the patriarchs begin below binah in the divine schema. This is something beyond the patriarchs, beyond any definition of Israel. Binah is not Israel. Binah really is the universal manifestation of divinity. Remember, the Talmud says 50, there are 50 measures of binah in the world. And 49 of them were given to Moses, but the 50th even Moses couldn't reach. And that's the ultimate universal place. Now, Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav says about that 50th measure of binah, or 50th gate of binah, the reason Moses couldn't get to it was that because that's the place of, in Hebrew it says, Ilu Yedativ Heyitiv, if I knew him, if I knew him, I would be him. So that's the place where the distinction between knowing God and being God is lost. And that, to me, has to be a universal place. That's something that all religions somehow know some glimmer of, and sometimes we jump toward it, sometimes we run away from it fiercely, but that is that ultimate mysterious place, and the ultimate mysterious place for me can never be particularistic.
So how does the present moment allow us to discover or recover or return to there?
I think it almost forces us to, or it almost forces me to, because nothing less than that works. Which is to say, any kind of particularism feels to me in a moment like this, particularly I feel the divisiveness of it, and I say, no, that's not where I want to go. I really want to be there with this whole human brotherhood that is facing this together. And I've chosen to stay in Israel because the Israeli system seems to be handling it better than the American system. But of course, I'm very concerned with how this is happening in the world, and we all have to be. There is no escape into particularity from this. Yes, you see on the news how many dead in this country and how many dead in that country, and it is all by countries. But you then see the foolishness, the sad foolishness of countries competing with one another for ventilators. And if I can get more from my people in my country, of course that's at the price of somebody else coming from somebody else's country. So then the sort of universal human, the sense of universal human family, universal human suffering feels very strong.
How about the sense of concern, anxiety, fear that we experience under present circumstances for our beloved ones, for the world itself, for the unknown? How is that addressed through this key metaphor that we're expounding, or do you have other tools in your arsenal to allow us to overcome it?
The Hasidic masters would say, take it back to its root. Take it back to its root, and binah is the root. You have these fears arising out of what they call the sort of left side of the divine, or left side of human consciousness, the place of panic. And the place of panic also often ties itself to the place of inadequacy. I'm being judged. This is happening because I'm not good enough. This is happening because I can't handle it. And those anxieties have to be taken back to their root in the place where they were born, in the womb of binah. Because in the womb of binah, it's all one, and that's the place of ultimate joy, they say. And so you take everything back to its root in the source, and say before desire and anxiety separated into right and left, they were all one, and we can go back to that source that is beyond all differentiation. And that's sort of my meditational intent, you might say, these days. It's sort of the semi-unspoken intent behind my daily prayers these days, to go back to the source, to go back to the one.
Understood. So the key to fear then is not courage, but transforming by transcending, or returning to the root. And by returning to the root, the fear dissipates. Is that how you would put it?
Yes. The fear gets transformed because it and love come from the same place, and then the love energy helps you transform the fear. That's what I would say. That's the teaching of the Hasidic masters about this kind of thing, as I understand it. And can I say it works for me every day, 100%? Of course not. Nothing does. But that's the place where I try to go, and it often that language often does work for me.
In other words, your daily intention is to look at the fear, look at the challenge, consciously contemplate its source, return to the root, and by returning to the root, transcending what is scary and fear-producing in the manifestation. That's quite a mental labor.
Yeah, it's a little, as you say it, it sounds a little more concocted than it feels when I do it. I think it happens to me that way, but I don't take it step by step in that kind of worked out formulation the way you just said it. Mm-hmm. But I try to go to that place of oneness. I try to, from that place of oneness, look down on the fear a little bit and see how silly it is, see how small-minded it ultimately is.
So what else does this work for? I mean, one of the questions that we're looking at dealing with is also equipping people with tools to deal with a sense of deprivation and loss of freedom, loss of friends, loss of money. Would the same strategy work there as well?
I don't know. I don't have formulas.
Well, you've had to deal a lot with loss over the past year. So you are a master in dealing with loss right now, aren't you?
Well, I've had to deal with loss indeed. And dealing with loss, there's a formula of getting through it day by day, and that's also very much a part of my life. And I would not call myself an expert in dealing with loss. I just call myself another human being who has dealt with loss.
Yeah, sorry if that was too presumptuous.
And have managed it, and have continued to be productive and to teach and to write and to do all the things out of which I get great pleasure. And today I was working on two projects: one a historical book that I'm writing, and one a kind of theological essay. And the 3 or 4 hours I was able to devote to that, between cleaning my kitchen and having various Skype conversations, were the best part of the day. There's still a lot of joy in those places, and I can complain about doing this isolation alone. Of course, my friends, I have 2 friends here, one of whom has 5 little kids at home and one of whom has 6 little kids at home, and they're having a much harder time than I am in some ways being alone. In some ways, being alone is a grace for me, it's a gift for me, because I do have hours to write, and I do care a great deal. At this point in my life, I'm going to be pushing 80 next year. At this point in my life, legacy is what it's all about. And that legacy has to do with 2 things, with writing and teaching. Yeah. And it's a great blessing in the midst of all this corona anxiety. Both of those things go on. I taught a couple of different groups today, and I also put in some hours of writing. And so, as I say, in addition to cleaning my kitchen and things like that, I was today was now it's late in the evening here in Jerusalem. I can look back and say, yes, this was a good day.
I'm really glad to hear that. So back to the question: does the notion of binah help us with dealing with loss and deprivation?
Yes, but I don't. It's not my question. It's not my kind of question, because in some ways it's a tactical question rather than a devotional question.
How do you mean that?
Well, how does it help us is not something that makes me feel very comfortable, because it is to me the reality of the underlying oneness of existence is, and I want to open myself to it and be there and be there with it and reach toward it, and in good moments celebrate it. And I don't want to ask, how does this help me? What does this do for me? When I do that, I feel that's turning aside from what my devotional life is supposed to be. In the end, I look back, maybe at the end of a day, maybe at the end of a period, maybe at the end of my life. I look back and say, oh, that helped me greatly. That got me through. But I don't want to ask in advance,
but we need to change hats here. I'm not asking you just autobiographically. I'm asking you as a teacher. And I'm asking you as a teacher who addresses others who themselves are struggling with that sense of loss and deprivation, and you're holding certain conceptual and experiential keys, and will those keys be helpful to those people? If you look at it that way, that's much less self-interested.
And how can I know what keys will be helpful to people? How can I know? I can only say what's been helpful to me and share it. Yes, there is something prescriptive about being a religious teacher, of course. But the prescriptive is not do this and it will help you. The prescriptive is learn how to open your heart, learn how to be present.
Last try. What would the Hasidic teachers have, now one last try on this one. What would the Hasidic teachers have said if they were
just exactly what I just said to you?
Like that.
Exactly what I just said to you. It's not about what it can do for you. Ask not what your country can do for you. ... etc.
Okay. When we go into that protected space, that inner space where we have to be alone and we have to be disconnected from other people, how do we remember the others? Obviously, with television and technology, it's easy. I mean, you told us how you're going country by country and thinking about it. But what are the spiritual foundations of our remembering and recalling everyone around as part of our spiritual growth, not just as part of being informed about the news?
Well, memory is a very big part of our spiritual lives, of course. We have these. I'm writing a book now on a Hasidic teacher named Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, a famous 18th century rabbi. The first thing he ever published was a little thin book, a commentary on the 6 things a Jew is supposed to remember every day. And there's a list of those 6 things, in the back of the daily prayer book, in the old style prayer books. I don't know anybody who recites them every day, but there's supposed to be 6 things you remember every day. And he wrote a very, I think he's the only person I know of who wrote a commentary on those 6 remembrances. So remembering creation, remembering Torah, remembering coming out of Egypt, remembering the list of 6 things we're supposed to remember. But of course, all of those are spiritualized for me too. So I remember creation. I've sort of recreated the old custom of reciting the 6 days of creation on the 6 days of the week when I finish my prayers in the morning. Remembering coming out of Egypt for me is, of course, personal liberation and my own Egypts and my own Sinai and my own golden calves that I have struggled with and worshipped and had to melt down. All those things are sort of the spiritual moments of my life, and my spiritual life is very much tied to memory and struggle with memory and being careful not to remember so much that it drags me down. I think we have a big problem with that in our tradition of sometimes being over dedicated to memories. That means sort of living in one's spiritual past, as opposed to being open to the newness of the future. So yes, memory is very important and enriching and tricky, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so when you go into your space, how can you remember your unity with all others, and in what way or why do you have that sense of unity with others in this moment when the world is going through the coronavirus?
Because we're all going through it together. Because we are one in it. It shows the oneness. It shows the oneness within us and behind us. I feel that as I listen to and feel with people around the world. I'm here in Jerusalem. New York is now the epicenter of this. And you know how many friends I have in New York. We American Jews always have lots of friends in New York because it's such a big center of Jewish life. And so I'm writing to my friends in New York and sending them little things I write to sort of give them something to distract them. And also spoke to somebody in Australia the other day. And so there is the sense of unity is just overpowering to me. And that takes me back to the underlying one. My religious life is very much a religious life, as you can hear in this conversation about contemplating oneness and being present to the one that fills and surrounds us at the same time. And this experience is one that just pushes that doorway open a little wider than usual.
Yeah, I think that's really a good summary of where you're holding and where your message for this point in time is. Is there anything else that you want to add by way of reflections and aspirations for this moment and for the future?
Well, maybe wind up with a little bit of a prayer.
That would be wonderful.
I've been looking at a blessing in our daily service, in our daily Amida. I've been looking at the phrase that says, "Bless this year for us. May this turn out to be a good year." Usually that's a blessing about crops and about seasons. But I sort of think about this year we are all going through together, and it may really well be a full year. And it's a horrible year, and so many losses and so much suffering. And I want to pray that it turn out for the good in the end. This is going to be a transformative year in history, a transformative year in people's lives. Some of the young people I've been teaching who are between 15 and 25 right now, they will be the Corona generation. I will forever be the Vietnam War generation American. You know, that was the formative experience of my post-adolescence. And Israelis, you know, are the Yom Kippur War generation, and the Americans are the 9/11 generation. This is going to be the Corona generation. So what will it be? Will they be a wonderful, more responsible generation because they've stared in the face of death and loss and become more mature and serious? Or will they become ridiculous hedonists because they live through this and now I want to do whatever I want? So when I say, bless this year l'tovah, bless this year for good, my prayer is that out of all this suffering comes a good transformation of humanity and not a bad one.
Wow, that is absolutely perfect. You know, I saw something in the Rishiner that you may like. I think I mentioned to you that I've really developed a great love for him.
Yes.
So I saw in Irin Kadishin, he says like this. It says regarding the Exodus, that when it comes to Passover, you will do Havodah Hazot, and we'll get to the word Zot in a second, on this month. Now Zot, he plays with, as you know, Zot is very loaded in Kabbalistic associations, and he said Zot ties to Leviticus 16, Bezot Yavo Aaron al HaKodesh. It's the worship, it's the work of Yom Kippur. So he says on Passover, you can do the work of Yom Kippur. So the sense of starting, so it says by celebrating Passover, which actually is a new beginning anyway, because Nisan is a beginning of a new year biblically. So you relive, when you, on Passover, in a sense, in Nisan, you're reliving Tishrei. You're starting again a new year. So when you say a Tashana Hazot, it's not just a Tashana Hazot, it's the evocation of everything that started 6 months ago, but it's actually a new beginning, because it is really the new beginning of a new year. So let me wish you a good beginning of a good year, and wish the whole world a new beginning of a good year, and a new orientation towards life, the great return to the great mother, to the great understanding, to the great presence that's universal and goes beyond all differentiation, will be the fruit that we take for this new beginning.
Amen, amen. And a good Pesach to you, good, happy koshers, as best as you can, joyous Pesach to one and all.
Absolutely. I don't know, Peter was supposed to be there monitoring if there are any questions from whoever has or hasn't tuned in, but I've been trying to signal her if there are any questions, and I'm not getting any responses. So, and I'm not succeeding in going onto the Facebook Live page. So I think that
Their,
if you
their questions will have to be added to the 4, and that's okay.
the question that depends on what kind of a son. Depends on what kind of a son or daughter is waiting to ask that question. Yeah.
The 4 questions in the Seder are never answered. That's the nice thing about the questions. They're never answered. Avodim Hayinu is never an answer to there are no answers to the specific questions.
Here, Peter hears me.
There's only the big answer.
There are no questions, and unfortunately something happened with my WhatsApp and it stopped working.
Okay, so Peter tells me there's no questions and her WhatsApp's nowhere. So if there are no questions, then we wish everyone a Chag Sameach Kasher, and thank you, Art.
Good to be with you.